Hey, I'm Loren Norris with StoryPower TV. I really appreciate you being here. We've got another guest in studio today, and from everything that I hear, I've only met this guy one time before. He was signing books at an event that we were both at. I don't think we even talked that night. But I ran into him again last night in Dallas at the C-Suite Network event. Had a chance to chat with him because I walked back up and he was talking to my wife. And you know, I always get nervous when somebody's talking to my wife. Somebody could try to steal her from me. I've been working on this for 30 years. I can't just give up now. But we had a great conversation. And then I realized from everybody around that this guy's quite the living legend. He's got some interesting philosophies and worldviews and experiences. And he's literally been all over the world teaching, of all things, communication. So I thought, what better guest could we possibly have on StoryPower TV? So please help me welcome into my studio, Mr. Bob Hopkins. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it. Appreciate you making the drive out from Dallas and joining us to be a part of the show. So you said, and these books have two different titles, I notice. One says Philanthropy Misunderstood, and one says Philanthropy Understood. But when you were telling me about these books, you said you misunderstood philanthropy. What does that mean?
Well, what did you think philanthropy was? And when did you hear it for the first time?
I think the first time I heard it was probably when I was in speech competitions. Because it was one of those words that we started playing around with. I don't think a whole lot of people knew it. I've got a couple of books on philanthropy and nonprofit giving and things of that nature. It's a bit of a tangled mess. My wife worked for 10 years at Daystar. I have a lot of clients who are in nonprofits, ministries, churches, feeding the homeless, things of that nature. And so it's kind of been a notion. But I'm curious to hear what the expert says on it, because I think there are a lot of people that use it pedantically but not correctly.
Mm-hmm. Well, all my life, I've heard the word philanthropy, but never knew what it was.
Okay.
And I go into my classes today and ask students today, 2026, what is philanthropy? They don't know.
It's a big word.
Yeah. And so we are in silence for a minute, and then somebody will raise their hand and say, is that Big Brothers, Big Sisters? And I go, yes, it is. And then somebody will say, oh, is that the American Heart Association? And I say, yes, it is. But it is what? It is what? Well, most people thought, and I did too, that it was about money.
Right.
Because I'm told that the people whose names are on hospitals and libraries and big buildings that are nonprofit organizations or not, hospitals even, have names, and I go, a philanthropist obviously gave money to that. And on television I would hear people be introduced as philanthropists, and it was always somebody we all knew who had a lot of money.
Right. So there's a direct correlation between the amount of money they have and can give, disposable income, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes isn't that goodwill for the purpose of branding? I know, for an example, part of my job at one point was I worked for a Fortune 50 company, and one of the things that we did was give a whole lot of money to a little place called Happy Hill Farm.
Yeah, I know it.
For the purpose of having our company name emblazoned on the outside of their building.
Yeah, exactly. You know who loves Happy Hill Farm is Jerry Jones, who's the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, and that's how I know about it. Mm-hmm. Okay, I did a magazine for 12 years called Philanthropy in Texas, and on the front covers were only people who were billionaires or multimillionaires who could give money, and that's what I would go around and do. And I knew, you know that Fort Worth people, you know the Basses. I knew that they were philanthropists because the Bass Hall is obviously a nonprofit organization, and they put millions of dollars into that, et cetera, et cetera. We all know billionaires, and we all know philanthropists because of the names on buildings.
Right, and the work that they've done.
Yeah.
So to speak. Well, the work that's been done in their name?
Partially, and all of them have foundations, nonprofit organizations, and most people don't know what a nonprofit organization really is. And I say most people. The people I run around with, they know, but it's because we're all in nonprofit management.
Right.
But people who aren't in nonprofit management and don't belong to a nonprofit organization do not know what a nonprofit organization really is or how it functions. And then finally, when you start giving money, somebody says, oh, you know what, you could get a tax deduction for this donation.
It's a write-off.
It's a 501c3, and I said, oh yes. And so at the end of every year, I'd go, okay, I gave $15 to the Boy Scouts, and I wrote that down, and I did that all kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, I walk into my office when I was doing philanthropy in Texas, and I said, I want to put Boone Pickens on the front cover of my magazine. And my secretary said, how much money does he give? And I thought, gosh, do I have to come up with a number for him to be qualified to be a philanthropist and on the front cover? And then I said to her, it doesn't matter. And I wondered why I said it doesn't matter. And I said it because it doesn't matter.
So is that an existential moment for you?
It was.
It was like an aha moment. You're like, wait a minute.
Right.
Why are we even qualifying what it means?
Yeah. And so I thought, well, we never could call Mother Teresa a philanthropist because she never gave any money. But yet people are referring to her as a philanthropist. And then I thought, what about my mother? My mother was the biggest giver of everything she had. The doors were open on both sides of the house. People could come in, they would eat the food. She would say, sit down, have a great time, this and this, can I help you to the car? Can we go help people? Can we go to the trailer park and take a basket of groceries? Can we go and give love and all this kinds of stuff? And I realized those are the kinds of people that need to be in my magazine, not the ones who don't care. All they want is a tax write-off. So we call Boone Pickens a philanthropist because he does all that. But on the other hand, Boone Pickens was a giver. You know why? Because he had a heart and a soul for the projects that he gave money to. He was on the board of directors of all of those organizations. He would show up every time they were having an event for Big Brothers and Big Sisters because he cared about the project. That's what a philanthropist is.
So, Tim Tebow.
What about him?
Sex trafficking, helping kids with the second chance prom for kids with Down syndrome.
Well, he's a philanthropist who's going to hell. Maybe. But does he have a heart for the giving? And maybe not. So he's in the shadows, obviously, of being a philanthropist. If he just wouldn't do anything nasty to people, he could probably be a philanthropist. And you're right, there's many definitions, therefore, of defining somebody and what they do. Is that philanthropic or not?
Well, he's the guy who's rescuing people from sex trafficking, bringing them out, things of that nature, having the second chance prom. I thought he was doing pretty good stuff. I would consider myself a fan
Right.
of the work that he's done since he left the NFL.
Right. Well, I've done bad things in my life,
Mm-hmm.
but does that mean I can't be a philanthropist just because I have? No. That doesn't mean I can't, because I every day will do something for somebody else, and for that moment during that day, I'm a philanthropist. But if I do something wrong against somebody on purpose, or even accidentally, I obviously, it taints a little bit of my history and who I am in my character. And so I think it's all about character too.
So is it the kind of person that makes them a good philanthropist, or is it the kind of work they do that makes them a good
I think it's
philanthropist?
both. I don't think it's necessarily the kind of work. You know what philanthropy is? It is doing something for someone that brings you joy as much as it brings them joy. And so therefore, when I go out and do something, I'd only do it because it brings me joy.
There was a phrase, and I'm trying to remember what definition they attached it to, but the definition, regardless of the word before it, the definition was doing something for someone who can do nothing for you in return.
No, I don't think so, because, you know, I can't do a lot of things for a lot of people. I just can't, because of the fact I'm not physically able to, not mentally, or I'm not in the same space as they are, but I can over here. So I can be a philanthropist over here, even though I can't be a philanthropist over here. And we were talking about that coming up here today.
Mm-hmm.
I was a philanthropist today because I could.
Okay.
I could do something for somebody because it was across the street from my house. And because they didn't have any food, they didn't have any money. And what it ended up, they didn't have a ride to where they
Right.
were going either. And she says, with all of her bags, would you take me to my apartment? It's 2 blocks away. And I said, without thinking, yes. And so I opened up everything. I was a philanthropist at that moment. But I couldn't carry all the stuff up to her apartment because I'm an old man. And she did herself finally get everything up to the 3rd floor, but I was a philanthropist for a little while. Let's put it that way. And so anyway, I don't think that we need to say, well, he wasn't a philanthropist here, he wasn't a philanthropist there. I focus on what the positive things are about what philanthropy is. And in those 2 books, there's nothing negative here about anybody or anything.
So tell me the difference between philanthropy misunderstood and philanthropy understood.
There isn't any. It's just that I wanted people to read the introduction to the first book to realize that philanthropy was not about money. And the people in it, though, were people who didn't necessarily give money to get that name.
It wasn't a PR campaign.
Yeah. And what happened was when I finished this in 2019, 2 more years and 3 more years and going to Uganda and finding a baby in the snow and doing all kinds of other things that I have done, I realized that I have 100 more people that I could have put in another book.
So now you have 2.
And now I have 2 books, and they're totally the same, but totally different because they're different people.
So tell me about your magazine. You said you published your magazine for 10 years plus. How long was that?
12 years.
12 years.
75 issues. Okay, so I'm at a conference. I used to belong to the National Society of Fundraising Executives because I'm a professional fundraiser.
Okay.
I would go to all these meetings. So in Chicago, I happened to be in the big grand hall, and I saw a magazine that was a tabloid, and it was called the Philanthropy Journal of North Carolina.
Okay.
And I thought, this is interesting. The word philanthropy on a magazine. I wonder what this is. And so I took a copy and read it all the way back to Dallas on the airplane, got off the airplane and said, I'm going to do a Philanthropy in Texas magazine.
And when was that? When did you start that?
That was in 1996.
Okay.
And I did that for 12 years. It finished in 2008 because of the downturn of the economy, and I couldn't get anybody to advertise anymore because all of these big companies who were in my magazines obviously had a downturn of the economy, and they were, the internet was invented, and they would go to the internet, and that's where they would actually put their stuff.
It's a whole lot cheaper to run an ad on Facebook than it is to run an ad in a print magazine.
So I thought there was something wrong with me, and I thought people didn't like me all of a sudden for some reason because they wouldn't anymore do it. And that was the reason. 2008, 9, and 10 were terrible times for the United States as far as the economy was concerned. A lot of things changed. A lot of people went out of business. Nonprofits went out of business like crazy. Kind of like during the pandemic, we had another time where we were challenged about this topic, and a lot of people weren't giving anymore because they lost their jobs or they weren't able to work, or the organizations couldn't do special events anymore, so they just weren't out in the public eye anymore. And so it was a time for me to have to quit the magazine, which is one of the most terrible days of my life.
A lot of people miss the power of a live event like a gala or a banquet or something like that. And I've worked with several nonprofits that are coaching clients of mine that they do an annual gala or an awards banquet or something of that nature. And people are like, why do you spend all the money on that? And I'm like, because you can't buy that kind of goodwill, exposure, notoriety, relationship, conversation any other way. I mean, you run all the Facebook ads, billboards, television ads, logos on your car, whatever you want to. But when people gather together in a room of a like mind, they have a common cause, which is the purpose of your nonprofit, and they also have a common heart, and that is to give to your nonprofit. You build a synergy in that room that exponentially grows.
Right.
And when those people move from this nonprofit to this nonprofit at the gala, at the banquet, at the annual event, then they realize there are people here that I don't see here. They either cross-pollinate or they begin to realize I need to invite some other people over.
Right.
Of course, boards are designed to do that as well.
Yeah. So whoever decides to look at what we're saying right now, I do want to tell everybody publicly that gathering people together is probably the most important thing that you do in the process of raising money, because you're raising awareness and you're feeling good about things, and people give to people who have a good cause. And you don't give to people if you only see them on a screen. And so consequently, those years of the pandemic were not good years for philanthropy.
I'm not convinced. In fact, I am convinced the opposite, that they were bad years for humanity all the way around. I was just listening to Chase Hughes. He's a retired Navy chief, psychologist, done a lot of work for the CIA, literally wrote the book on mind manipulation. Lots of studies on the MK Ultra program and things of that nature. And one of the things that he pointed out is a little outline that he uses acrostic called FATE. And in that he talks about how you manage someone's focus, you manage their attention, you manage their tribe, and you can change their energy. And you can literally almost hypnotize somebody. But he said that tribe part is so huge because that tribe part is who do you associate with, who validates you, who makes you important, who are you important to. The authority that you have in that all comes from your tribe. And if you're cast out of the tribe, you're done.
Yeah.
And so it's like what you said, when I had to shut down the magazine, that doesn't feel like my business isn't going the way that I want it to. It feels personal.
Yeah.
That feels like I failed at something. I gave it everything that I
Yeah.
had and I wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to take that personally.
Right. Yeah, it was 2008 that I quit it, so therefore it's been a lot of years since that I think about it probably every week. And even my editor will call me from time to time, Bob, let's do the magazine again. That was so much fun. And I say, I wish we could. Do you know something I don't know? Do you have an extra $1 million that you want to put into a magazine because the written word is just not as important as it used to be. In fact, these are my last 2 books. I'm now transitioning to film, and I think that's going to be my next vehicle of communicating.
You mean like a documentary film?
Like lots of documentary films about things, 5 or 6 minutes. Okay, tell me about neurofibromatosis. Okay, just a second. Here, watch 3 minutes.
Right.
You got it. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to see anybody. I don't have to call
You do it on your
anybody.
phone.
You do it on your phone.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing a lot of that, and there's a lot of, I have a website, philanthropyunited.org, and I'm putting a lot of film on philanthropyunited.org. And it's also a way to get in touch with me, to buy a book, to connect with me, to have a telephone number, et cetera, if you want my advice or me to participate in any of your events. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
So when you compile a book like this, because one of the things that I've run into in the nonprofit world is that there are donors who love to give anonymously. There are donors, like we've talked about, that they want their name on the building, they want their name up, up there. But a lot of them feel like they get targeted by everybody and their dog for donations the minute their name is exposed as a philanthropist. That, when people know that I have money to give, they all come looking for my money. Did you feel, as you were compiling this book or having the conversations with the people that are in the book, that any of them were like, please don't publish that because I'm going to get solicited by everybody in the world for this?
Okay, the answer in Texas is no. In Texas, there was nobody who refused me except one family. Said, we really don't want people to know what we do. One family out of probably 1,000 people in my magazines, and then in my book, nobody refused me in the book.
Interesting.
In Texas, I'm from Kansas. It didn't work in Kansas. Nobody wants to be on the front cover in Kansas because nobody wants them to know they have the money to give. In Mexico or in any of these other countries, they do not want people to know they have money to give because they will be targeted and they will be robbed.
Well, for scandals and everything else.
Yeah, exactly. But not in Texas. I didn't ever have in fact, I had people's PR firms call me and say, would you be interested in putting so-and-so on the front cover of your magazine?
Interesting.
And they wanted it because they're proud. They're proud of what they're capable of doing. In fact, Boone Pickens, do you remember Boone Pickens? He actually asked me, what would Jesus, the Bible, say about me grandizing that I'd give this and that and this and that? And of course, I don't know the Bible that well to say on chapter Matthew so-and-so. I just said, you know what? I think it says in the Bible that you need to tell people what you do so that they too can follow in your footsteps. And Boone Pickens said, that's a good answer. Thank you. Okay, you could be, I'll be on the front cover of your magazine. But no, I think it's just the opposite. People love being recognized for what they do. In fact, I get calls all the time. When are you doing your next event? When are you doing a deal? Because I have a story. If you're interested in a story, and it may not be about them, but it may be about somebody else. But on the other hand, then I realized that they too should be in the book for whatever reason. So I'm not doing another book, but I am doing a newsletter. And it's going to go out to the 2,000 people who have actually bought books that I know, that I have on my database, who are going to receive these newsletters. And these newsletters are going to be old people who have done more things and new people that I have just run across that now need to be in this magazine. I mean, and be in this newsletter that I'm going to create and send it out by email to all these folks that would love to know what else is going on.
And these are not necessarily things tied to a specific nonprofit or even genre of nonprofits, because you've got stuff in here from cancer to Uganda to children's diseases to pets.
Yeah. Well, every cause in here has a nonprofit. It may not be mentioned in what they do, because that's not necessarily why they give, because it was an organization connected to it. But you know, there's people who go out and beautify our neighborhoods and our parks, et cetera, and they don't say, by the way, what organization is this sponsoring? Sponsoring my work.
Right.
It doesn't matter to them. They just know they want to do something good.
Like the guy who goes around and mows lawns and cleans up. I don't know if you've seen that in one of the hottest Facebook trends in the world right now, on YouTube as well. They go take their lawn care gear and they just clean up somebody's yard. And people are like, why would you do that for free? And I'm like, he's making $40,000 a month from YouTube AdSense.
Yeah, we do this.
Why would he not do that?
We do this. I teach college.
Okay.
And during the Christmas holidays, we actually found a house from Big Brothers Big Sisters and a family who owned the house, and they were going through some terrible times and their house looked like heck. So we asked them, and didn't ask them, would they be willing if we went in and painted everything and fixed everything inside and out? And my students, we had 3 different shifts for 10 days from the time we got out of college till Christmas, went in and completely overdid or redid a house inside and out. And then on Christmas morning, the president of the college came and we did a ribbon cutting ceremony, and the family got to come in and see their new house. These kids loved it. In fact, I was on the elevator just recently, and one of my former students who was back there then said, Bob, you may not remember me, but I was the one in that class that actually did remodeled the house.
And those students were practicing philanthropy.
They were practicing philanthropy, but didn't know what it was and didn't know that they should or could do something without paying for it or without somebody asking them to do it. And I asked them to do it, but she said to me, that was one of the happiest and most memorable times of my life, is when you took us out and made us
Give us the opportunity.
go and figure out how to better that family's lives.
Yeah.
And I remember it too as like one of the most fun things that I've ever done, is actually do that activity.
I remember one of the stories that I helped one of the nonprofits that I work with craft was a lady who was down and out. She was living at a bus stop. Of course, the city would come by and roust her from time to time, and she'd kind of make her way around and come back. But she would sleep at night with their children chained to her for fear that someone's going to steal her kids in the middle of the night. And so this was her life pattern for several months, and one of the nonprofits that I work with found her and had a conversation with her, and they're like, you know, how did you get here? You know, is there a path back to, you know, stability? Is there a dollar figure? Do you have a home that, you know, you could be staying in? And she said, I moved here from New Jersey to get married, and the guy that I was going to marry turned out to be not worth it, and I have no way to get home, and I don't have a job, and I have no place to stay, and the kids are not enrolled in school, and I don't know what to do. And the leader of the nonprofit picked up the phone and said, do you have family in New Jersey? She's like, I do, but I've been gone so long, there's no chance they'll take me back. So she called them, and they're like, well, yes, we've been looking for her. We want our grandkids home. Of course we'll take her back. Just get her here. And so the nonprofit bought her a bus ticket and sent her home. And last I heard, she was working on her master's degree.
Right.
Restarting her life, rebuilding and starting over. And that was obviously an act of philanthropy. And when we tell that story so that someone could say, if I'm not going to be out on the streets, if I'm not going to be rebuilding the house, if I'm not going to be showing up to bathe the dogs that are in the shelter, what can I do? Well, you could send us a check for the bus fare, because we do that kind of stuff on a regular basis. We give away about 5,000 pairs of shoes every Christmas. You could send us some shoes. Recently, a nonprofit right here in Granbury, somebody broke into the building where all the nonprofits work together in kind of an incubator. It was hosted by United Way. Somebody broke into the building, destroyed all the equipment, They busted up the televisions that were hanging on the wall. Everything that was there for the Christmas project, they stole.
Uh-huh.
And you're like, how non-philanthropic do you have to be to steal the stuff that's donated to give to those who can't buy? That's a bad heart, in my opinion. There's something wrong with you if you steal what is intended to be a gift for somebody else.
You know,
That's the Grinch.
I have a story similar to that. When I was 14 years old, I would steal from the dime store for Christmas presents to my family. I didn't steal from anybody except the dime store, but finally the man who was in charge of the dime store called my dad, who was a lawyer in that small town in Kansas, and said, Dan, I want to tell you what your son's been doing. So Dad came to me and said, Bob, I understand you've been stealing these things to give to us. Thank you very much. We enjoyed those Christmas presents, but would you go get all the other stuff that you've stolen and come down and bring it here so we're going to take it back? So I know that. But you know, it gave me a lot of joy to give away anything to anybody just because it makes me happy. And by the way, back to that house that we went in and redid, and when we cut the ribbon, the family, of course, cried when they walked in. But you know who else cried? All of the students.
No, absolutely.
They cried because they loved the feeling of doing something for someone else, and especially something so significant that they had put hours and hours and hours into it. And they'll never forget it. And that's what I'm trying to do with my books, is to give people ideas on what they too can do to satisfy somebody else's needs, but also your own, which is feeling good about who you are. Because, you know, there is a book called Give to Live, and it's about what happens to the body when you do something good for someone as opposed to doing something bad in life, period. What happens, etc.
So are you talking about like the dopamine rush and the serotonin?
Yeah, and you live longer, they say, and you live happier, and your self-esteem is higher, and you make different kinds of decisions when you continually, on a daily basis, do something for somebody else over and over again. It's the highest part of your brain that can feel good.
So how do you not feel an odd, ironic twist of selfishness that I'm doing good for others because I feel good when I do it?
I don't think there's anything wrong with that kind of selfishness.
Interesting.
I think it's okay to be selfish. You know what? You have to have...
Is it like putting on your own oxygen mask before you worry about the other person in the plane?
You cannot help somebody if you don't feel full yourself. I have had people tell me, Bob, please don't call me anymore. I am so tired of all the things that we have done. I need to replenish my soul before I can give out any more love. So I think we all have to be full. And you are full by receiving, and you're full by giving, because both ways something's happening in the body that makes you feel better about yourself.
John Maxwell says, be a river, not a reservoir.
Yeah.
But he also says you cannot give what you do not have. And I think when you feel depleted, I do a lot of work with strength finders and things of that nature with my clients. And one of the things in strength finders is identifying what it is that really lights you up, that fills you up. And, you know, some people say, well, you got to take a sabbatical, you got to rest, you got to take time, you got to unplug, so that your own self can recuperate. And the irony is there are some people who are like, my sabbatical is going on a mission trip, building villages, and you're going to building water wells. Yeah, when I go do stuff like that, that lights me up. That is my fulfillment. And so I wonder how much of that kind of fits in that therapy. I don't want to lose the topic. I know you've got more to say on that, but I want to throw in another caveat because I think it's a layer of the same conversation. Many of the nonprofits that I work with that are my coaching clients are facing an odd dilemma. And that dilemma is many of their donors look like you and me and not like they're 20 and 30 years old. And as they age out and just by attrition are no longer giving, many of these organizations are finding their operating capital, their ability to do what they've been doing for 2 decades is vanishing. And yet the communication with the next generation that doesn't look like TikTok, it doesn't look like Facebook, it doesn't look like a 1-minute communication. In fact, one of the things that I tell them on a regular basis is people ask you a question like, so what do you do? Who do you serve? And they expect a TikTok answer, 30 to 90 seconds, and your answer is a Harry Potter novel. I mean, you can't explain what your ministry does or your nonprofit does without a tome of communication. You got to fix that. But the other thing is, it seems to me that what fulfills the dopamine, the serotonin, the emotional high of giving for young people today is completely different than it was a generation ago. Have you experienced that?
I think we're in a dilemma at the moment, what to do with the next generations,
Okay.
especially when we haven't been great role models ourselves
Okay.
in making a living or deciding how we're going to spend what it is that we're making. So I have a program called PAVE. It's called Philanthropy And Volunteerism in Education or Entrepreneurship. Philanthropy, PAVE. And in their books, you'll find many t-shirts that say PAVE.
Right.
And the people who are wearing these shirts are everybody, including children. So I have a program in elementary schools teaching an 8-week course on PAVE. We go in every Wednesday morning and teach them how to be a giver. Because I know, and you know, that philanthropy or giving is a learned behavior. We're
Yes.
not born givers, we're born takers.
How do we know that? Because when they're two, they go, mine!
Yes, and
We never
Mama
trained
says,
them that.
Mama says, share, share.
Yeah.
Philanthropy is what she's saying to them, but
Yeah.
she doesn't have a program around that topic. So we have now a program in schools, and I have elementary schools now who say, oh my God, I can't tell you how well our students are doing on their tax scores now that they've had the PAVE program. Why? Why are they doing better now than they used to, after we know it's the PAVE program that's changed their minds and hearts? Because
Why do you think that's the case?
they say, and I'm saying it too, because when they take the test, they feel good about who they are as people, and their answers are just different than when they haven't had the PAVE program. Attitude and behavior when taking tests or when doing anything is dependent on how you feel about yourself.
So the definition of attitude, and this is from Attitude Hack and from Dr. Caroline Leaf and Dr. Daniel Amen. An attitude is how you feel about what you think and what you think about how you feel. So when an emotion rises up and you process that as a thought, the result of that is an attitude. In my Attitude Hack course, we teach attitude engineering, which is how do you pre-instruct the dialogue, the story, so that they think and feel about a particular action, activity, or comment in a new way. How do you identify those phrases? And you know what I do not have in my list? I have the attitude of gratitude. I have the attitude of entitlement. I don't have the attitude of giving.
Okay, that's why we're teaching it. And what I have learned is that adults learn it too. I have had many adults who've been on my boards of directors who come to me after they're on the board for 2 or 3 months and said, we just came to thank you. We want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to be givers, because you know what? Our relationship and my marriage has so much increased. What we do as a family is so different than before the class. And I have students who take my class and take it home, and instead of going immediately to the computer or to play games or something else like talk on the telephone or do social
Right.
media, they're out saying, Mama, I want to plant flowers at the school. I understand that they're getting ready to do that. Would you go? And then the whole family gets involved. And there's a family in here whose son I had when he was 10. He's now 25. He's the president of my foundation. His name's Amit Banerjee. And the whole family got involved. And the mother and dad say, it was because of philanthropy that has changed our family to be such givers.
Wow.
And that's why I'm here, and that's why I agreed to come here, and that's why I did my books, is so other people would realize. Now I'm working with school districts, trying to get them to give me an hour a week to give us a class with the teacher who's willing to let us come in and do it. And these people who are coming in are trained students of mine or people who have already been through the program and go into the classroom, and we just want 8 hours, 1 week at a time.
And what kind of response are you getting from the schools on the initial offer?
Well, they love the idea until the superintendent comes to them and says, you know what? Texas is so low in our tax tests et cetera, et cetera. We're number 25 in quality education. We can't have love in the classrooms anymore. We have to do science and we have to do mathematics because that's what's on the tax test. The tax test does not measure love. So I had a principal come running down the hall saying, I'm going to write a letter to every principal in Dallas, Texas, and tell them that they've got to have the PAVE program because it changes everything. And then the superintendent comes in and says, no more love in the classroom. Bob, if you want to teach this class, it'll have to be before class or after class because we got to spend time preparing for the tax test.
My mother retired from teaching after almost 20 years, and one of her greatest frustrations when she was in the standard classroom was what we call teaching to the test. She said, we're not teaching them to learn. We're teaching them to memorize the answers that they think are going to be on the test so they can answer the test, because conformity to the test is more important than understanding the material. When she left the regular classroom and started working in the Challenger classroom, she took on every student that the school district had given up on. All of the rejects, all the social problems, all the ones that had been way too truant or in drug abuse or whatever else. And she was graduating them at a higher rate than the regular school system. But it was because they were taught to learn. They loved the process of learning. They were appreciated and honored and respected, regardless of what their past was. And in that environment, they flourished.
Yeah. Well, the other problem I have in thinking about education is that we don't have the best people teaching our children.
Go on.
I was in a conference for an hour and a half put on by the World Affairs Council, and all the head administrators were there talking about how bad our public education is.
And they're talking about the measurement of the results of passing the test, et cetera. Okay.
And how bad the programs are. An hour and a half, I had to listen to all of this, and not one time did anybody say any word about teacher. Nobody said anything about teachers. The word teacher was never brought into the discussion.
Interesting.
And I decided to take the microphone when it was time for questions and answers, and I jumped up there myself to this room and said, exactly, I said, you know what? You're not getting the best people to teach these children. You know why? Because you're not paying them anything. Who in their right mind wants to be a teacher and a teacher's salary when they can't afford a house, a home, feeding 3 to 4 people in the household?
And you're asking them to come back and provide school supplies and all kinds of stuff for the students in the classroom because the money's all gone to administration and not to the students.
And to build new schools. Dallas has just announced they're going to build tear down 22 schools and build 22 new schools, as if that's going to make a difference. But they're doing nothing about teachers' salaries.
How many campuses do we have abandoned?
Well, they have 4 or 5 abandoned, and you know, now they have the voucher system in Dallas, and this is in Texas, I think, totally.
All of Texas, yeah.
And 80,000 students from DISD are going to private schools now. And so what they're left with are students who can't afford to possibly go to a private school because they will have to pay some money, especially to go to St. Mark's or to go to Hockaday or something like that.
Or parents just don't have the worldview to think that way.
And that's right. And they don't want them out of the neighborhood because they can't get them to school because of busing and families and all those kinds of stuff. But nobody said any word about teachers. And I think when we decide that teachers are important enough that we're going to attract them to come into the field, the way it's going to attract them, obviously, it's money, because we can't live in Dallas, Texas on $60,000 and trying to raise a family of 4. You just cannot do it.
Right.
2 teachers can, because they each make $60,000. That's $120,000. $120,000 you can do it. But why do you have to have 2 people in the family to raise 2 or 3 children, making money and going to work every day, to things that they like? But education in Texas is not the best topic these days anyway, just because of the fact there's so much they can't do and can't say. And I'm an educator. I just retired 3 weeks ago, and now I can talk like this because I couldn't before, because nobody would approve what I had to say, and they wouldn't want me to talk bad-mouthing, you know, our educational system. So I'm between a rock and a hard place. But my new message is going to be, we've got to pay our teachers so that we can get better people who are actually qualified, and the students love, who know how to think faster and higher than the students are able to think.
What about the idea of using the PAVE program in teacher training?
Okay. Well, thank goodness for John DeLander, who is with DISD, and Gigi Gartner, who has the program called Common Sense that's been in the school system for 27 years. They allow these two classes they allow that class to happen, and now I'm trying to get PAVE into DISD.
I saw Common Sense in the book. She had a shepherd, right?
Yeah, Gigi Gardner.
And what exactly does she do?
Well, she inherited a fortune from her parents, and her mother is the one who started Common Sense with her. But Gigi works full-time. She has businesses that she has to do and attend to, but she also has some funds that she's able to go into the classrooms, and she's convinced them that Common Sense is a good program. Anyway, so Gigi also loves dogs. So she's not just going in for kids, she just loves dogs.
So what does Common Sense teach? Is it parallel to PAVE, or are they complementary?
They're complementary because they're talking about financing, because you do have to have money to go give to nonprofit organizations. The kids do learn about the nonprofit sector, because each of the classrooms, and there's 22 schools in DISD that participated this particular year, they've raised $1 million in 27 years, and all the kids have chosen where that money goes to. So that's what they learned there. But philanthropy means behavior.
Right.
Philanthropy means who you are as a person, and that's what I teach. I'm not teaching the money part, I'm teaching behavior.
So what do you think of programs like Lemonade Day?
I think it's wonderful. I love Lemonade Day. It gets kids to sell lemonade and do that kind of thing. And I have a story in my first book about Lemonade Day, actually. A little boy, when he was 5 years old, was born with 2 fingers cut together. So they had to go to Scottish Rite Hospital and get him separated. And so his mother came up with the idea, during Lemonade Day and during the Swiss Avenue Historic District, why don't you go out there and sell lemonade, and we'll give it all to Scottish Rite Hospital in thanking them for separating your deal. Okay, so the kid's now getting ready for college. He was 5 years old then, ready for college. And he's a philanthropist. He knows that giving is so much joy, because every time he gave some money to Scottish Rite Hospital, the doctors all clapped for him as he got to walk through the hospital, because they rewarded him for, like they should, all philanthropists, saying, "You did good today, Bobby."
Yeah. So we accidentally started our DJ business in 2005. And by the end of 2006, we had a handful of American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, Cystic Fibrosis, the list goes on, of events, because they're family-oriented events. Many of them are outdoor walks, marathons, climbs, that kind of stuff, bike-a-thons, stride, all that kind of. In fact, May 16th and 17th in Dallas and Fort Worth, we'll be emceeing the event for the Great Strides for cystic fibrosis. We've done that for years and years and years. The comment I made before about the attrition of donors doesn't seem to be affecting cystic fibrosis.
Well,
the age group of that event continues to stay, and maybe it's because their push is for kids with cystic fibrosis, and so the immediate adjacent giver donor impact is parents between 20 and 40 years old.
Yeah. Okay, well, ask cystic fibrosis what happened during the pandemic, when they actually put all their money and their efforts into doing a walk that raises millions of dollars for cystic fibrosis, because it is part of their culture, doing events and doing that walk. So people are going to come back year after year after year, pandemic or no pandemic, usually. Yeah. But they do not have a donor. They don't have donors to give money on an individual basis, because they won't do an annual campaign. They do everything at that special event.
Yeah, I think they do 5 events a year. We've always done all 5 of them, but recently they had a guy, one of the events is called Finest. They do it in Fort Worth and they do it in Dallas. Their budgets got tighter and tighter and tighter on that. They rent a really nice venue. They have kind of a wine and cheese party. It's a more posh type of an event. And they had a guy who said, I've been one of the major donors of this. In fact, the last time I was at the event, he was probably in his mid to late 20s, had just launched his own law firm, was doing really well for himself. And he said, whatever we raise in the room right now, in the next 12 minutes, it was an auction or something. So whatever we raise in the next 12 minutes, I'll match it 100% out of my own pocket. I think his contribution was around $15,000 person. But he came back and he's like, how much do we have to pay for the entertainment for this?
Yeah.
And he said, I'll add that to my donation every year. Instead of paying him, I'll just bring my own equipment and do it. He really likes being on the microphone. So I don't do that one anymore, but I still do.
Well, Cystic Fibrosis has that event nailed down. They know how to do it. It's not going to go away ever, regardless, just because there's so much effort into that deal. But when you have, I did neurofibromatosis. I did 12 different events.
The world's too big.
I did 12 different events. And when I left, the executive director said, I can't do 12 events. We're going to go back to corporate giving, and we're going to go back to donor giving, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so pandemic or no pandemic, they're still going to get their money because they didn't have an event. But
do you still believe, after all the work you've done in nonprofits and fundraising, that events are the strongest way to do that?
No, I don't. I think, yeah, I do. And I think the annual campaign, which is in usually October, November, is really the best way. That's where we get our individual donations, not necessarily from events, because events can't count individual donations. But 87% of all the money in America is raised by individuals who actually give money out of their pockets to organizations.
I did not know that. I do know one of my donors was having an issue. One of my nonprofits, and one of their biggest donors just said, we're not going to this year. Maybe we'll be back next year. And it was like 12% of their total annual budget.
Right.
And the nonprofit head was like, I don't even know, why would they do that? What did I do wrong? What did I say wrong? And I said, well, remind me again, where they are on the stock exchange. And we looked it up, and their net value was down like $140 million. I'm like, that's why. Mm-hmm. It's like having a closure magazine now, because the economy changes or the process changes. That's not personal. It's not that they don't love you anymore or believe in what you're doing, but when that whole pie shrinks, you've got to make different priority choices.
Well, I think the word philanthropy is out there now. I think I think fundraising is out there now. And when I talk to people and I say, what are you involved with? And if they're not involved in anything, they hang their head, because they know they're supposed to be involved. To be an American citizen, you need to be involved in something in the community, I think.
To be a good human. Yeah.
To be a good human.
Yeah.
And they say, I've got 4 kids and I'm just trying to get through right. But when I win the lottery, I'll get back into giving, kind of a thing. But they know in America that this is the thing to do. My challenge is when I go to Uganda, they don't know that they're supposed to be community involved. And so I come in and say, I'm going to do a community involved thing. And they go, this feels so good. We never have done this before. We don't know how to do this kind of a thing. That's why I love going to these third world countries where they don't know about giving and they don't know about sharing.
So is the program PAVE, is it philosophical? Is it emotional, psychological? Is it tactical? Is it strategic? How does that, over those 8 weeks, what kind of things?
Right.
Just a quick synopsis. What does that program teach?
I've been doing it for 29 years, something like that. So it's changed and evolved over the years, obviously. We can do it in 5 weeks. We can do it in 3 days if we wanted to, because we just take through the information that people don't know about giving. They don't know the statistics. They don't know that their job or their gift or their abilities have anything to do with the success of organizations until we tell them and thank them for what they do. They just really don't know the importance of it. That's why I do these 2 books, and that's why they're so popular. The first book is sold out, of course, and I just published this one. And one of the things that I'm trying to do, Loren, is to get kids reading these books. So I'm asking people, buy 10 books and let us give them to kids in schools who are taking the PAVE project and program so that they can read stories about themselves and other people doing this similar things. And 4th and 5th graders can read this book. It's not hard to read these books. And by the way, these books all are written by the people who are in the books, not necessarily all by me.
Interesting.
But I'm connected to everybody in here. They're not in the book unless I'm connected with them in some way. And most of them, I give a little paragraph about how I'm involved or how I started them being involved in the project.
So you're not just talking about friends or connections, you're talking about organizations that you've contributed to either time-wise or emotionally or financially.
Well, it's mainly been individuals. I mean, all these people that I know all these people, and I've worked with all these people.
These individuals are individual givers? They're not necessarily nonprofit operators?
No, not necessarily so. So people like, for instance, this is Santa Claus, and they gave to some organization, obviously. Kimberly DeLape did, and her husband, and she told me in here somewhere about what the organization is, and she probably wouldn't have given to this particular organization if it hadn't been organized. But there's other people, like Paper for Water, created their own organization. They didn't have a cause. They decided to build water wells. There is Living Water, which is an international organization that they're affiliated with only in some aspects of the development of these water wells. But these girls have raised $5 million. And by the way, I had them when they were 5 and 7 years old, and they're now in college and raised $5 million, 175 water wells in 17 different countries. In fact, they're having a walk, their second year to have the walk at the Galleria, where they have done origamis all over the covered ice skating rink that I'm going to be a part of. And I'll get to see this kind of a success. But this family is incredible.
Wow.
If it wasn't for Mom and Dad, this thing wouldn't have happened. But these are a family.
It does seem, like you said, it's not a natural reaction to give, because selfishness is our human nature. But if we don't model it, they'll never mimic it.
Yeah.
And we could tell them till we're blue in the face.
Yeah.
But if they don't see Mom and Dad do it, it's not going to happen. They're not going to repeat just what they've heard. They've got to see it.
Yeah.
And like you said, sometimes you got to take them out there and hand them a paintbrush.
Yeah. Well, so many of these organizations would fail if they didn't have a legacy of some kind and people following in their footsteps. Paper for Water will never go away, just because they have hundreds and hundreds of people who are invested in making this happen. And they have visited the water wells in the countries. They have videos, et cetera, and every week they're doing something. I don't know how they do it. Keep up. But I could turn to any page and tell you a story about whomever. You know Scott Murray?
I do.
Okay.
Saw him last night, in fact.
Right. Well, I did too. Absolutely, at the event that we went to together. I found him in 1987 when I was executive director of neurofibromatosis. And I said, this man knows everybody in town. I need to get on his coattails. And so I have, since 1987, been on his coattails. And he's one of my best friends now, because I want to be his best friend, even though he may not say that my top best friends don't include Bob Hopkins. But Scott Murray's one of the top 10.
Yeah, he has been an MC for several of my nonprofit clients.
Yeah. So anyway, I gave him a special section in this book because he knows more people than I, and there's a lot of folks in here, for instance, that I know now because of him. And, you know, these are famous names in football and basketball and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But Scott Murray is the man, truly. I hang on to him and I thank him for all what he has taught me. And by the way, I don't do any of this by myself. I gather a team together, and of course I have a team member with me today that you're going to meet, obviously. And he's the chairman of my board and relatively new, but totally excited about introducing him to a new way of living. Not only is it me, but it's also me, and you, and them, and theirs, and yes.
How would you feel about it if we just scoot your chair over and let him stand right there beside you? I think your mic will pick him up and we can introduce him. You're okay with that?
That's great. Hello?
Dimitri, you want to join us over here?
What do you like, you guys?
Step right over here beside, and we may have to scoot you don't have to take your mic off. I think count for me. Just count to 5. We'll see if your mic.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So, let's do this. Grab your bar stool you're sitting on there,
Yes, sir.
and
Sorry, I
We-
dozed off for a second.
it's a long drive out here, isn't it?
I was listening to you guys.
There you go, Karen. Great shot. So, you've been working with Bob for how long? I understand you're on the board now. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Been knowing Bob a little over a year now.
He was a student of mine
Okay.
in college, and he's one of these students who's older than most of the students, but who decided that he liked my attitude and my behavior and what I'm doing in society, and he and his wife and their 2 kids are very involved in everything I do now because they want to be. There's people who want to be affiliated with these kinds of things.
Right.
So I'm never embarrassed to ask somebody to join, because you know what? Everybody wants this time and somebody to ask them also. So you out there who are listening to us, don't be afraid to ask people to help you, because they probably want to and need it.
Well, and like you said, when that transition happens, when you give for the first time, if you give sacrificially, it's even greater reward internally. But when you give that first time and you see somebody's face light up and you're like, I did that.
Yeah.
There's something inside you that fires off differently.
He definitely saw that, and he changed my whole outlook. You know, that's why I've dedicated, you know, at least this part of my life to making sure people hear his legacy and, you know, helping him with anything else he has planned to do, you know.
So what was the project you were involved in that really brought that out in you when you were in his class?
It was the classroom itself, and he also had us step out, and you know, it was just a favor he had asked the class. He said, you know, I have a lot of these books that just came in and I need them moved to a storage facility. If anybody has a truck or would like to come and help, you know, please do come and help. At that point in my life, I was pretty much done helping people. I was always giving, not
All
seeing
served
it.
out.
I was all served out. You know, I said I did my part. I had been
Right.
in multiple situations where I had given, and some of those situations took a lot out of me and left me dry, you know. And I have a family, I have a wife, so I said, I can't do this to them anymore. I'm a giver, but I can't put them through it, you know.
Right.
And when he asked for help, I really liked him as a person. I liked how he was teaching the class. I liked how he was getting everybody involved. And so I said, I'm gonna go help this old man out. And so I go and I help him, and I'm not the only one there. You know, there were students that not only were from my class that were there, but previous students that he had had in other years that had come out to help him.
So like a lifelong impact kind of
Right,
thing.
right. And I saw firsthand, like, it's not just me that got hit with what I call the Bob effect. You know, these other students were impacted as well, you know. So, yeah, I just started digging deeper. He had handed out a book that was donated or paid for by a donor to give everybody in class a book. So we all got one of these cool books, and I went home and read it over with my family and realized I was in class with a living legend. And the feelings that I started getting shortly after that were, I remember seeing a caution cone in the middle of the road. That was the first thing. And everybody that was driving down this road was just driving around these cones that had fallen over into the street that were on the sidewalk. And I just pulled up the car, got out, you know, put the cones on the sidewalk and carried on, you know. But the kids in the back seat were like, "Why'd you do that, Dad? You know, what was that? What was that about?" And, you know, I just told them, I just wanted to put the cones up, you know. It just takes 5 seconds, you know,
Yeah.
Why not do it? And it opened up their minds. Like, why don't more people do this? You know, thousands of people just passed this before we got to it, you know. What made my dad do that? And it started, they started looking at me in a different perspective, you know, through a different lens. They're like, my dad's the guy that's gonna stop and fix things. My dad is the guy that's gonna stop and help when he can. And it inspired them to do the same thing. Now my kids are givers, you know. They work hard for their chore money. They work real hard for their chore money. I homeschool my kids, and you know, we teach them entrepreneurship, philanthropy. We teach them a lot of these things. And they were always saving up for something, you know. All their change and their quarters, their dimes, their nickels, they would save it up and they'd buy something they wanted, you know. Sometimes that thing would be $100, sometimes it would be $5. But they had their goals, you know, that they were saving up for. Now, all of their change that is not in bill form, they hand out to the homeless.
Very nice.
And
So how does your wife feel about this process? Let me ask this question as a trick question. How does your wife feel about who you've become in this process?
yeah, so earlier I heard him speak on that it changes people's lives, not just, you know, themselves. Their whole family dynamic changed, where they'll come up to them 2 or 3 months after working with them like, wow, you didn't just change one aspect, you changed our whole life. You know,
Right.
that this new thing you gave my husband or my wife, or, you know, which is the Bob effect, you know, has come into our household, and it's changed how we do things as a whole.
Yeah.
And it has, you know, just the spirit of giving, the spirit of helping others, the spirit of just giving back to those less fortunate or those without a voice has completely changed the way I do everything in my life. You know, when me and my wife are at a crossroads where we're not agreeing on something, I can't necessarily explain how doing this stuff has allowed us to maneuver through those spots in life so much easier, you know.
I think it's that spirit of selflessness
Yes.
that begins to come in, which is it's a Christ-like nature, right?
100%.
Love is not selfish,
100%.
not bold, proud, rude. Yeah. But I think it's also that the fruit of the Spirit begins to come in, and that giving and that
Amen.
sacrifice and that long suffering. That's a nature that it's not the natural in us; it's the supernatural in us that allows that to change, and it changes the way we treat other people.
Well, I'm going to interject just a minute, because his wife then asked me, I want to be a part, what can I do? And I said, what can you do? And she says, I'm a graphic designer.
Oh, there you
I
go.
said, would you design our next event, you know, on paper? And she did. And now she's the one who's putting together this newsletter that I just told you that we're doing, because she wants to do what he's doing, and she wants to be part of the team, basically. Yeah. And the kids are right there with us. You know, I have horses. We all go out and do horses, and we clean up and stuff like that. And we take other people to go see horses. Yeah. So this is another way we are giving as a family. I'm a kind of the part of the family too, because we're now doing horses and bringing other kids to come in and do horses.
Yeah, we adopted him. He's Papa now.
How many grandkids you got now?
Well, 2.
I have 13.
Yeah.
I love John Maxwell's phrase, that grandkids are the reward for not killing your own.
Yeah.
No, most definitely. He's changed our life, you know, and I've seen the way he impacts others. It's a transformation, you know, going through Bob and getting hit with this Bob effect. But like you said, you know, it's almost Christ-like. You know, we're walking in the footsteps of what Christ would want us to do,
Right.
You know, and it just changes us internally. I feel like my cells even look different. I just feel so much of a better person.
There's a guy who wrote a book. It's a bestseller. I may have an extra copy of it. I'll give it to you if I do. But the concept in the book was God the Father gave his Son. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son.
Right.
And he said, most people don't realize you need to stop right there and ask the question, what did he do and why? He loved, and so he gave.
Right.
If you just built your life philosophy around if you love, then give,
Right.
you're good.
100%.
and then it's going to change who that you are. It's going to change the quality of your life, and it's going to change the quality of the world.
100%. And it does change the quality of life. And I can't guarantee this for everyone who does become a giver and decide to give. This is just what happened to me. You know, I would say that I was 90-10. I was 10% a giver, 90% keep for me and mine.
Right.
Since I met Bob, it wasn't a decision I made necessarily that we sat down at the table and we said we're going to give away 90% of what we make and keep 10. It's just kind of what happened.
Right.
And that's what we did. We ended up giving 90% of what we had away, whether it be our time, our money, our resources, anything that we had. We were giving away 90% of what we were getting and giving it and only keeping 10% of it for our family. Since I've met Bob a year ago, my 10% that I would give, that being my time and my money, the 10% that I used to give and the 90% that I used to keep, now the 10% that I keep is greater than the 90% I used to keep a year ago.
I can't remember who it was. It was somebody who was world famous who said, when I started giving, and his was more referential to God, to the tithe, to the church.
Right.
He said, when I started giving to the church, what I realized is you can't outgive God. He said, I would give more, and the more I'd give, the more would show up, and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. But every time I gave, there was more left over than I gave, and I just kept giving. And he said, I live on 1 or 2% of everything that comes in, and I don't know where it's coming from, but it keeps coming in because I keep giving it away.
Right.
I was like, that's a great problem to have.
I've almost completely stopped worrying about how bills are going to get paid, or where things are going to come from for these goals I have planned. I literally sit in prayer, and I know 100% in my heart and soul what needs to come to me is going to come to me. What I need to give, what I need to achieve in order to give is going to come to me. I just have to stay diligent. I have to keep my head down. I have to keep working. I have to stay focused. I have to keep my mind and my heart in the same spot. If I do, it's just magic. It happens every time.
Okay, so I don't want to bring this to an end, but I kind of have to. I have a question that we ask everybody who's a guest on StoryPower TV. So I'll start with you, Bob, and then Dimitri. What is your last name, Dimitri?
Garza.
Garza. I'll start with Bob and let you answer this question, and then that'll give you a minute to just kind of ponder it for a second. So everybody who's on the show, I ask one question. It's a compound question, by the way. I only gave you the first half of it earlier. The compound question is, who is Jesus to you, and why should I care?
Well, you've already told me that you were going to ask me this question, and I thought, I wonder what I'm going to say. He's the true philanthropist. I mean, he truly is. I mean, he says all those things that all these books in philanthropy are now saying. Mm-hmm. Give to live. Give to do everything and anything. That's what Jesus says. And so he's not my master necessarily so. God is my spirit, but Jesus is the man, if he was a man, who has all the attributes that I think all of us achieve or want to achieve in our lives. Probably.
So he's a great example.
He's a great example. Yeah. And Mother Teresa, for those who don't want Jesus, can go to Mother Teresa because she was the same way.
She was a very good example of him.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you for that. Dimitri?
He's the one and only. He's God in human form, If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation in this way. Because he came and he gave his life and he did the things that he did, we are able to, I thank him for everything that I have, every breath I take, every day I'm awake, everything he allows me to accomplish in his name. I'm forever grateful for him. He's the reason there's dirt. He's the reason there is space. He's the reason there's time. I believe he is everything. In everything, through and throughout, I believe he is the world, he is space, he is time, he is everything to me. And I owe my life to him.
I believe that's what it says. In him we live and move and have our being.
100%.
Dimitri, I appreciate you being here.
Yes, sir.
Bob, thanks for coming. And for those of you who are still watching, thank you for being here. Look, hit the like, the subscribe, the share button. Make sure that everybody out there knows this. Even if you're still curious, who is this Jesus character and what does God have to do with any of this? Let me tell you exactly what Bob said. When you give, you become a different you. If you want to be a better person, you want to have better relationships with the people you work with, the people in your community, the people in your house, learn to give. And the more you give, the more you're going to realize you become a different you. Take a chance. What's it going to hurt? And if you're curious, who is this Jesus character? I'm going to give you a bold dare. Ask him. Ask him this question. Do you love me? You might be shocked that you get an answer. You might be shocked at the answer you get. But I can promise you this. If you ask him, do you love me? You will get an answer. That's not my promise. That's his. He says, if you seek me, I will be found by you. So seek him. And if you're mad at him, he's done something wrong. He's done something in your life that you didn't like, you weren't a fan of. Scold him. Tell him. Cuss him out. He's got big boy pants. He'll get over it. And then he'll still answer you. Try me. But just ask him. I'm Loren Norris with StoryPower TV. Have a blessed day.